Yeah, this morning when I was driving, I was kind of pondering the Kashmiri Shavism and why it seems so, they'll use the same terms and say it's non-dual. In the end, it's really different. And I think that what happens, the one text that I'm doing, the Bhairav, the Jnana Tantra, that's from Kashmiri Shavism, and a lot of it is really good, but a lot of it is, some of it is really unusual. Like they said, you could do it by imagination, but of course that's not going to stay. And then, some of the thing, you have to hold that thoughtless state, which is doership. And then the words they use, it's very telling: oneness, unity, and it's such a different end. And I think that what happens is they go to just that first projection of I am, right, and then wrap ego around it. So it's seen as, oh, yeah, I'm Shiva, I'm this, I'm that, I'm, and that's like I would say the last great stumbling block.
For sure. Yeah.
Now, the Kashmiri Shavism started in 9-something. Advaita was in 8. Advaita is prior to Kashmiri Shavism. And Advaita means going beyond the Vedas. Yeah. Then Kashmiri Shavism came in 9-something. But then it died out. So they say that, Lakshman Drew had that thing, but no, it's not true. There was not an unbroken lineage of that. It died out for a time.
Interesting.
But what really hit me was when I went through the thing last night as to the difference between Advaita and Kashmiri.
Yeah.
And Kashmiri doesn't go to that total depersonalization. It says that it believes in Spanda, that it comes from, everything has this, it comes from that point of expansion, and that, so really when you get to that, it's a total, almost, I would say 180 degrees away from each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sounds like you. Go ahead.
I think where they go to is that point of that first projection of I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it stays there. And then one wraps it around ego, because the thoughts, from what it sounds like, is, oh, I remember it. It's, it was a great experience. It's, but it's not an ongoing cognition.
Oh, yeah. It really, the language, the wording of it just is so different. Like, and you can really see how people could get stuck there.
Yeah, I think that they've gone one step and they haven't gone through that final door.
Oh, for sure. At least from the language itself, and I, some of just that little tiny bit I watched of that video, some of the way he was speaking was the same thing. I can remember it, and he was saying it was more in the background and then came forward again. Yeah,
it's like, it reminds me a lot of Andrew Cohen, same thing. When I start talking about it, it comes back, and it's,
Yeah.
That same thing. It's an experience. It's come back, and they're off on a run again. And one's like, St. Nietzscheananda and all these other ones that are teaching from that, Muktananda, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, all of them were doing Kashmiri Shavism. All of them are from that thing, that type of thing. And they stop, and ego wraps itself around it and projects, I am a god. You know, it's like the ones Nietzsche on the people are saying, oh yes, I took sannyas so I could be a god.
Yeah.
So I can live like a god. You know, because everything comes from that first Shiva, and we are Shiva, and so we are gods. We are all, you know, and they go there. They don't go to that absolute still point.
Right. Wow. So they just choose to still stay in body, too. And I don't know, it just, maybe not choose, but it does just feel
I think
like
it just stops. It stops there. They don't. It stops at that first projection of I am. Because all the words are in unity, in oneness. Well, unity is still divisionary. It's still dualistic. Unity takes two things to be bonded together.
Sure, yeah.
So the more I sit there and watch it and see what their explanation of it is, I'll have to go back and read it to again, but their thing is that nothing can come from that absolute still point, and all knowledge, and then there was also this one that was teaching up in Rishikesh, same thing, that they think that part of it is study, and they also do the pujas. They do these, you know, they used to do sacrifice. They're not going to talk about it, but they used to do sacrifices way back when, with that as well. Okay, you got to really dig to find that information, though. But, yeah, they're not going to expound them. But, yeah, all of those things are dualistics. You know, this reminds me of, like, when I wrote that one about we are the puja. That was way early in my path that I wrote that. That cognition of, you know, we are the temple and we are the puja and we are the offering. That was written like way back early, you know, before one totally, you know, before one reaches that point of realization.
Yeah, you can really feel the difference in that compared to how you speak now.
Yeah, but reading their thing, everything comes from what they call spanda, or this expansion. And it all comes from Shiva. But it's, you know, when they say that Shiva is without body, but they take on the form of Shiva, and it becomes like we're all little gods and goddesses, and everything. Oh, and the other big huge thing was not that this world is the illusion, like the dream state. It's all real.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it's all real, and we're all like little gods and goddesses and doing this play.
That's telling right there.
Exactly. I mean, it's like when you really get to the difference in it, it's between night and day. I think that, like I said, they come to that first projection of I am and wrap it around ego, and that can be a very dangerous place to be.
For sure. And there's still that identification there. People just, wow, that was, like you said, that's a huge barrier when people just are stuck in that and call that the end point, and they do not want to budge from it.
Exactly. And it's very affirming to ego.
Yes, and that's it. And people are so drawn to that. You know, there's teachers in that state that speak that way, and so many, they gather so many students because they just love it, and as you say, because it's ego affirming. Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, the more you really get into it, and I'll post some links later today to the two things where they go through and explain the Advaita versus the Kashmiri Shavism. And even though they say it's non-dual, there's no way that it's non-dual.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how people call that non-dual, and you hear that kind of thing. That a lot of times they'll say self-realized, which, again, when I see that word, I just say self-realized, because that is like this big pot of so many things that people can get into.
Well, no, because what they're doing is self-realization is what the end point is. They're doing what's called God realization. Now, God realization, you would think that it's further along the self-realization, but it's not. God realization is that point of that recognizing God within everything. Mm-hmm. Where they're at is the point of God realization, not self-realization. Self-realization is when one has broken through and gone beyond that self-identity.
Right, but I mean, Lakshman too, that's what he was saying, self-realized,
Yeah.
I don't know. It might just spell sometimes. Yeah, but that God realization. Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you, for sure. But, gosh, yeah, that's a huge difference. That's a good thing to bring out.
It's a huge difference, because I'm going, wait a minute, they say that it's non-dual. And some of the text is fine for most of it. There's some points in it, red flags. Like I said, you use imagination, you do all these things. A lot of it is good pointers. Things that I teach and use on this path, how to go. But they don't go far enough. All of this stuff is under doership. Where one has to hold that. No, if you continue to do practices and you go all the way, like I said, on the altar of truth I lay myself, and it's like one dies in that point and then comes back to that realization. They don't ever go through that point.
Right, and again, the same thing with that difference. People just kind of speak about it more as an experience, and then, and all this giddy bliss and different things and joy, and, but you don't really hear about that death, or that
they never enter that total stillness. They don't enter. They like I said, it feels like they stop at that I am, and again, oneness, and that very bliss-filled thing that everything is real and we are co-creators. With God, we are we are part and parcel of God, and we are co-creators.
Yeah.
And they haven't done that, haven't gone further into that absolute stillness. They discount that absolute stillness.
Unfortunate, huh?
Yeah, because they say that, oh no, it's got to come from intellectual, it's got to come from this thing, and that's still, if it's absolutely still, it can't come from that. Well, no, it can. Because when one goes into that and remains in that stillness, and in that moment one can see it's pure intellect. Okay? But they go, if it's absolute still, it can never expand. Well, it does. The occluding, that was what we say, the occluding of Maya. They don't say that's an occlusion.
Wow.
For them, Maya is not an occlusion; it's an expansion of. That's what I mean. This is the very telling. Maya is not an occlusion; it's the expansion. It's the face of Shiva. They say Shakti is the face of Shiva. It's not an occlusion.
Wow, that's huge.
It's huge. People say, oh, it's just such a minor little thing. Well, it's not a minor thing. It's a huge difference.
Oh
huge. A chasm. It's a major chasm between the two.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. See, that one would be, oh, no. Anyway, just to listen to you, it's like, thank goodness, that's just like such a, that something to celebrate, that actually mine can go completely, whereas you hear this and it sounds like it's just, that's it. And you just, oh, man, no.
Yeah, it's
what
just...
a huge thing.
It's a huge, huge thing, because in this we talk about, and I don't know how Kashmiri Shavism can use those words. Like I said, Nityananda tries to say Turiya Tata, but what he's talking about is not Turiya. Yeah. It's not being in that absolute still mind all the time. They're holding that. They're holding, that. And it's totally a different type of a thing. But yeah, I was musing it today as I'm driving, and I'm going, what is this difference? Because it is such a huge chasm.
Oh, that's huge.
I'm feeling a huge chasm. But if you read the philosophies, they have a couple of minor differences. Well, it's not minor.
No, that's not minor, and that really just reaffirms mind in some ways as being the thing, almost,
Exactly.
Like yeah. Oh, wow. No, that's like, God, that's like reaffirming ignorance or the mind. I don't know. For me, that's the way it felt when you said that. It just was, whoa, that's like a huge block.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah, it kind of just
between everything is real, it's all real, and we are the co-creators with God. We are this God. Yeah. We are that expansion. We are that, versus it's absolute still. There's that absolute still point, and that when one, rests in realization, moksha here, everything proceeds from that stillness. That still is always in place. Mm-hmm. One sees out of stillness, it's a totally different thing, a totally different place.
Oh, night and day. I mean, just like they say, even a few thoughts can cover, like they say, where, and that's the reality. And where you say, that's gone. I mean, that's the way thoughts are.
Right. Thoughts are the covering. It's that expansion. Yeah. It's that occlusion.
Yes.
Well, they don't see Maya as occlusion.
My goodness. Wow.
So again, it's so vastly different. And this is what I said. Kundalini can either bring clarity or absolute delusion.
Yeah, and you can really see how people that have had an experience or that teachers and can read that kind of stuff, that can really affirm where they're at and affirm their stance as being, this God, and, made it, and this is it, and all sorts of things that justify it. Wow, that's interesting to hear that.
But actually sitting with that cognition, if you put yourself in that consciousness, it's totally almost opposite.
Definitely, yeah.
So it's not for hearing it and looking at it and then trying to go into that type of consciousness. It's really almost 180 degrees away from each other.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they really are. And that's where that one stops. That's it.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow, because this was more than likely a type of, I guess all that you can call it practice now, an experience or whatever that has been out there for so long, and probably held up as being quite, that's it. This is the thing. I mean, isn't that the case with this? Or?
Oh, yeah. They say that that's moksha, that they've entered liberation.
I mean,
but I don't see any liberation in that, because it's still, I don't care how you want to run it, it's still dualism. It's still mind. It's all mind play.
From that language and what you're saying, that's the feeling for sure. That's it. Exactly.
Now, I'll have to go more into it when I get back home, but just pondering it today, like I said, was driving, it was just kind of floating around. All of a sudden it just hit. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I need to stop and do this video while it's still kind of floating around there, because you know how things are here. If I don't do it now, it's just gone. That's the way
it floats away like a helium balloon.
Exactly. It's so that poofed on.
Let me get this out now.
Exactly. So I stopped. I got my coffee, and I said, "Oh, I'll call Siddhananda," and I got my coffee, and I'll stop and do this video real quick, because otherwise it's going to be gone. It's going to be, yeah.
Yeah, but that's a really important thing, because we were saying that this is held up as being something that is speaking to moksha, or the final liberation, and it's been out there for a long time and held up as that. So wow, that's another thing to just.
It's really something to look at, but I can see why it's so affirming to ego, why it's so affirming to those that want to, because you play and dance and sing and say, I'm already that, and again, you use imagination like it says there, but it's not going to stick, or you have to hold this thoughtless state, or it's or they say that the teacher is going to hold it. Well, that happens here with students when they come into the present, that mind stills.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, you still have to come to that point where you surrender utterly, and that, otherwise it's an experience, and this is not what it's about, is an experience. It has to be the living reality.
Yeah, perfect. And, when you said imagination, when I was watching that video, that just was, how could someone call that as being the final?
Exactly.
Being it, just the word imagination, you're imagining it, you're producing.
Again, that's why, these ones like Muktananda and Nityananda and all the ones that are doing that, they get these people, they're giving these satsangs, they have all these people in the room, which creates more energy. They're beating the drums every time they say something. Every time Nityananda says something, creates a lot more energy. And they all are in this, almost a hypnosis type of state of believing it in imagination.
Yeah.
And so, for some time, you're going to convince yourself, and it's going to feel very real. But I don't see any of them going to a point of that absolute surrender, and they don't go into that state of Advaita, that absolute still point that implodes, or they don't go anywhere near Nibbana, blown out. There is no blown out there. It's expanded.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a good point, because you don't hear that word surrender being used in the practices. You just don't hear them really speaking of that, do they?
Well, I think they use surrender, but surrender into Nityananda.
Yeah, there you go.
They use surrender, but it's surrender into Nityananda. The only viewpoint that's valid is his.
Okay, so that's a nature difference as well. That's huge.
It's a huge difference. Yeah. Huge difference. But that's what they surrender to. They see him as God. They surrender into Nityananda. Everything is Nityanandam speak. Nityananda mentality. They are convincing themselves of that, stripping everything clear from what they had known to become that. That's it.
Wow, gosh, now that again, you can see the difference in the
huge
teachings
difference
on this path compared to something surrendered to someone else that says they're God, or that you feel,
right?
Man,
total difference. Total difference. This is nobody surrendering into, sitting me up on a throne or whatever. This is about doing your practices and finding out what you are and what you are not.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, it's so
and surrendering into that heart center.
Yeah.
Not surrendering into a persona, surrendering into your heart center.
Oh, for sure. And that difference is, and again, it just, to me, that just is a huge difference, and a really one that, want to say dangerous in many ways, you know, just really
it can be. It could be.
Potentially, I mean, because you can see a lot that comes from that sort of thing. You can see the differences. You can see where people are at within those, you know, when they get into those kinds of things, that have those teachers that, you know, believe they're a God and say, surrender to me, and that kind of
Exactly.
thing. You know, it's very different, and that's all, you know, and something to put out there so that people are aware of.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge difference. But I'll have to, again, when I get back and have more time, really absorb into that and look at the difference of that cognition of being in that Kashmiri Shavite awareness. But from just this beginning thing, looking at it, that's what I got today. That's what was coming forward.
Right.
So I thought, it's good to stop, and maybe I'll get my coffee and I'll stop and I'll do this really quickly.
Yeah.
On the move satsang. It's like,
right. Well, that's great. Well, at least then it's out there, and you know, it'll help that. You know, more will come later. But
exactly.
This, and as that's another. Again, thank you for that, because that's another thing that I think a lot of people could read and not see these differences, which are really vast.
Oh, it's a vast. You know, they say, they've got these minor points, but it's not minor. I think it's a huge chasm.
Absolutely, and again, you know, I just the feeling that you got with that one bit, it just felt all of a sudden it just kind of slammed me as, whoa, that's a huge block.
Yeah,
it's a huge difference. So anyway, thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Namaste. I'm going to go close this out. We're almost at 30 minutes, so I don't know how long this is going to take to upload. I'll try to do it on the road, uploading on the road. This is...
Okay, namaste. I'll talk to you in a minute.
Namaste. Hold on just a second.
Okay.